Hey, Gassman, welcome back. Platinum League, Joker. Good times, good times. So we're gonna go for the two-factory tank push, which actually, okay. So the two-factory tank push, I've said bunches of times before, is reliant on hitting the Zerg when he is unprepared at the 8-minute mark with $2,000. And that unprepared is the key. So while you're making the tank push, you have some Marines, and you want to use a combination of Marines and Hellions to hide the push as long as possible. So the Marines need to be stationed where this Overlord will be poking in from over here, so that he never sees your factories. You might want to even put your factories on the left side of the base, so that the Overlord from the right side never finds them. And the Hellions, you usually want to make one or two Hellions before you even start tank production, because then you can use those Hellions to make sure that there's no lings between your half of the map and his base. Because the second he sees a tank moving across the map, he's going to throw down a bunch of production and try to make enough units to survive your attack. And you want that reaction to happen as late as possible. Because Zergs are going to keep spending their larvae and money on drones until, 8 minutes or even later if they don't see an attack coming. So if you can hide the attack for a really long time, it's just really beneficial. Also, the transition from this attack is going to be Thors and Marines, not more and more and more and more siege tanks. You don't want to be super siege tank heavy after the attack, because siege tanks, you can use like about 3 siege tanks to completely deny any possibility of a counterattack, because you can put them on this ledge and you have bunkers down here, and he can throw $1 billion of stuff at you and it won't do anything for a long time. And what you're really worried about is mutas and basically just mutas for the 10 to 12 minute mark. So the idea, you got 3 tanks quickly, and you're going to push with them, and they're going to hit his base at around 8 minutes. If right now you had killed that Overlord before he saw those factories, see, he already knows you're doing a tank push, and you had cleared out this Zergling and this Zergling with Hellion, 1 Hellion, then all he would know is that you have 1 Hellion. He would know, therefore, that you have 1 factory at least, but he wouldn't know whether you're going for your expansion. He wouldn't know that you're making siege tanks. He wouldn't know any of this stuff. So if we watch the production menu, he's still making extractors and drones and apparently a 3rd hatchery? No. Where's the hatchery that's building? Oh no, he's upgrading to a lair. He's already got his baneling list as a kind of just in case, and there he goes with the macro hatchery. So you just killed this Zergling, and the second you kill that Zergling, he's like, okay, make 10 lings, make a bunch of lings, make a bunch of lings, make a bunch of lings, and banelings. So you're giving him all this opportunity to react. Like, he would have $0 spent on army when you hit his base if you hadn't given him that warning. Also, obviously, you supply blocked yourself during this attack. It's important to note that any time you're going for a big early game push, you will be able to use the supply generated from constantly building another supply depot. Starting from your 2nd supply depot until 10 minutes, just have 1 SCV constantly making supply depots. Because even though for a short while when you're getting siege mode, which you didn't get, or while you're building the factories and not producing anything out of them, you'll see like, oh, I have 40 max supply and only 20 supply used. This is a waste. But it's not a waste, because once those factories finish and you build 2 tanks, bam, suddenly you're going to catch up on supply. So when you're doing a big push, keep this guy busy. I like that you queued up SCVs. I think it was probably a mistake because you're supply blocked, but I still like it anyway. It's important when you're microing to keep making SCVs back home, because it's easy to get distracted. The angle of this attack, you're just walking straight up there. If he had lings and banelings ready to splash into you, you'd lose all your Marines right there. This hatchery is in range of right here. If you'd gotten siege mode, you can just put all 3 of your tanks down here and kill the hatchery with your Marines spread out along the high ground. And that would be good times. Also, you notice how long it's taking? This tank was finished pretty recently, and the amount of time it would take for him to get here, this attack is going to have either won or lost the game by the time he shows up. So During this attack, you're not spending your money. Your money's kind of piling up. You did start the expansion, and that's good, and you did have a bunch of SCVs queued up, and you are making the next supply depot, but these buildings are idle. With this attack, you want to throw down a reactor core on this dude, and throw down an armory and an engineering bay, and then start preparing to defend against the mutas. Also, once this hatchery goes down, if I were you, I would have pulled out. You don't need to win the whole game here. You kill a hatchery and you're way ahead. With no marines to defend these siege tanks without siege mode are really bad against everything. Like everything. They only did well because of your huge spending advantage, but you can count on a Zerg to spend every single penny on military once he knows that an attack is coming. And every single penny for him, even on one base, is like 900 a minute. Whereas Terran, we always build SCVs and we always build supply depots even when we're attacking or defending. So our budget is usually about 500 a minute. So if he can spend 900 and you can spend 500, sure, you might have a bigger army when you get there the first time, but he's going to catch up pretty damn quick. So you want to get in there and either set up a bunker that can be repaired so that it doesn't matter how much military he builds, with your tanks down on the low ground and that kind of thing, or just do some damage and get away, because if you stay there forever, you're in big trouble. Also, 10 minutes is the timing you always want to keep track of. That's the muted timing. Obviously, he's going to be a little bit late, around 11 minutes. But after you've done some damage, then you really want to not lose those tanks, first of all, because that's a whole bunch of money you could have saved. But you don't want to make any more tanks either, because having 3 marines and 5 tanks, that's ridiculous. Like, you're way too tank heavy at this point, and that's a really easy trap to fall into. Actually, that's a trap that I fall into all the when I was first learning the push. Is like, well, hey, I have 2 factories and a naked Rex. What else can I build? Tanks are the only strong thing I can build, so I'm just going to build a ton of tanks. But then you end up with all these tanks against his mutas, and tanks don't kill mutas. As far as your macro goes, you're doing good. You're keeping up on supply depots and keeping up on worker production. You're spending a lot of your money, not necessarily all of it or anything, but you're doing okay in that regard. And now the transition from a tank push that was somewhat successful but didn't end the game is Thor Marine second push. You want to get, like I said, Armory, Engineering Bay, work on that +1 attack or armor, whichever one you choose, and get like 2 or 3 Thors. Wait for his mutas to come, and if they haven't come by about 14 minutes, go kill him. And if they have come, defend against them until about 14 minutes, and then go kill him. A game that starts with a 1-base push is very different from a game that starts with a big old sexy macro opening. Obviously, losing all these workers here is a really big factor in how this game started to fall apart for you. You transitioned from a tank push into just mass siege tank, and now you're completely unprepared for mutas. And again, this is pretty much exactly what I did the first couple of times I tried this push as well. The reaction that a Zerg has to getting tank pushed is usually to make either roaches or lings and banelings and a ton of mutas. Because tanks, the counter to tank is a muta. It's hard to transition into marines in a reasonable amount of time too, because you have all this gas. The tank push is so gas heavy that you're mining tons of gas. So as soon as you stop tank production, you've got like this huge boatloads of gas. And you got to spend that gas on something that can do that can fight against mutas until you're ready to start spending gas on upgrades, and that's why Thors are important. I mean, obviously, I don't like Thors in general for TvZ, but you have no other choice. You have 2 factories with 2 tech labs, and you've got to defend against mutas. The only viable option really is Thors. So we're taking a lot of damage from this muta harass. I mean, it feels like a lot of damage. It's not really. I would say, yeah, you went from being about $1,000 ahead to you lost about 2,000 damage to the muta harass, and now you're $1,000 behind. You're still economically in a reasonable lead, but because his immediate reaction was to take a third and to drone up, you're not going to be in an economic lead for much longer. Also, he's working on these upgrades. Upgraded lings have become so common. Just mass melee upgrades for Zerg that you really kind of have to get upgrades. An upgrade is a promise that you're not going to push for 3 minutes, though. So basically, you never want to upgrade when you're about to push, but then as soon as your push fails, if you're not planning on going back, that's a perfect time to throw down double upgrades. Defending and upgrading go really well together. So now you've transitioned from the 2 factory 1 racks into 3 racks, 2 factories, and 2 starports. I think this is, again, you're making double factory tanks all game, and I don't know about that. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's not great. It's not great. And just because those mutas are gone doesn't mean that they disappeared too. You got to start. It's 15 minutes. That's when your main starts to run dry in most games, and it looks like you've already lost a patch. So you really got to be looking to secure a third by usually 13 minutes is when you start it, so that you can go land it at 15 minutes. You're salvaging a bunker because all your tanks got stuck. That's pretty funny. And now you're going to try to make a push. This is a ridiculous push because he has enough stuff to mop this up, sure. But even if he didn't, just those mutas that he had before would be enough. Maybe not. Not enough to kill these marines, but Mutaling is really strong against small numbers of things like this. And Mutaling crush, dead. So yeah, a tank-heavy army is really bad for pushing across the map. It's good in a static position. It's good here, and then it's good here. But in between here and here, it's crap. So you need to make Hellions, and you need to make sure that there's nothing waiting to kill your tanks in between here and there. Make like 1 Hellion. You know, just Hellions are super fast, and they're great for checking out what's going to be in front of you. And you never want to move tanks into an area that you don't have vision of. So you move a Hellion, look all around, find out if he's got stuff there, and then keep the Hellion here and start moving towards the Hellion, and then move the Hellion to the watchtower and move towards the Hellion, and so on and so forth. Because if he comes to counter you, you want to siege up those tanks so that they're done sieging before the Lings get in range of you. Really important never to fight with unsieged tanks in TvZ because they're just so terribly bad. Very bad. Let's look. I'm curious now. It might take a second. SC2 docs. Google. DPS. Damn it. I guess I don't have it. I haven't gone to it recently enough, so it's not in my smart bar. My bar isn't smart enough. Do. Boop. Sorry, just testing. Yeah, tank. First, let's get benchmark. What is just an unupgraded, non-stimmed Marine? It's 1490. So that's like a standard unit, naked, not doing anything special unit. Unsieged tank is 558. 5. So if a Marine does 14 DPS per dollar and a tank does 5, he's a third as good. And Marine has 90 health per dollar, tank has 58, so he's half as good. So total, he's about 1/6 as good as building Marines. So tanks are terrible. And this is part of why I said to make Thors, because Thors are pretty bad too, relative to not Hellions, Marines and Medevacs. But if you have to have something that can shoot, especially, you know, like Thors are decent. You know, they're bad relative to stuff, but at least they're not. Oh crap! I deleted that. I think it said 9.8. But let's do it the right way and copy. 9.4. So yeah, 9.488. They have the same health per dollar as Marines, and they have, you know, 10 damage instead of 14. So they're about 4 times better than tanks, unsieged tanks. So yeah, I would make Thors as a transition from this. So you make three tanks, you push, do whatever damage you can do, and then from there you make, you know, about 2 tanks to help defend in case he counters you, and then from there you just kind of push only Thor Marine and engine, I mean turrets, Thor Marine turret, and then you can start working on upgrades, add racks, and start transitioning into a more Marine heavy composition. You should note, just in general, it's really hard to transition from a 2 factory, 1 base opening into a successful build. I think in this game you had a chance because you did knock down his hatchery and you did kill most of his drones. So you had a really good chance to win this game. But if you can't knock down his hatchery and kill all of his drones, it becomes really hard to do anything useful. he interrupted your blue flame, but is blue flame really that important? Blue flame is great against lings, but it takes a lot of micro to use it well. Like if you just have a bunch of blue flame hellions sitting here, and you got marines in front of them, and then a bunch of ling baneling walk in, your blue flame hellions are just going to die, and they're not going to do enough damage to justify the cost, especially of the upgrade and all the hellions. They have to be microed to be good. So blue flame hellions are good if you're the type of person who can be out on the map looking for his army. Oh, I found his army. Let's roast some lings and run away. Roast some more lings and run away. Let's get map control with them. They're very good for map control. But as just part of your army, like to fight with, they're not very good. I mean, I do get some because they take more banelings than they cost in money. But don't make double factory blue flame hellion at this point in the game. I mean, at this point in the game, you're kind of screwed. You've lost $7,500 and the game is over. So let's not even watch the rest. So yeah, you got to decide before the game even starts whether you're the type of person who can use hellions while keeping up on his macro. And if that's true, then when you make hellions, you're kind of committing to harassing with them. You get out there and gain map control, and then put them at home and macro for a little bit, and then get back out there and clear the watchtowers and harass a little bit, and then go home and macro some more. And you know, never try to macro while macroing your hellions; they'll just end up dying by links rounds and stuff. But if you don't want to do that, and I usually don't, I mean, it takes a lot of effort to macro and use hellions at the same time. If you don't think you can keep up on it, don't make them, because they're not a good unit to just put in your army. If they don't move during the like, their main advantage is their speed, and if they don't get to abuse their speed, they're just not good. Not good at all. So yeah, these banelings are gonna kill all your marines at once. I think, like, you probably know by now that a marine heavy composition needs to be spread out to do well against Zerg, but also not only against banelings. Like, you didn't know he had banelings, so it's hard to fault you for not spreading before you even knew that they were a threat. But tanks, if you're better off pushing with 3 tanks in siege mode than 4 tanks. I mean, obviously 4 tanks in siege mode would be even better, but definitely get siege mode before you even push, because sieged tanks are great and unsieged tanks are craps. But if you had a bunch of sieged tanks down here and you had your marines in a big ball, then as soon as the drones or lings touch your marine ball, then your tanks are going to wipe out all your marines. So that's a neat thing, is that because your tanks do friendly fire, it's advantageous to spread your marines out anyway. So then when the banelings come, they're already spread out, and you're like, huh, what's up? So yeah, 7 minutes-ish is like when the push happens, and if you look at army spending, it's 6 minutes until... So he's got basically no army spending. Your first couple of tanks pop, and now you've got this huge army, and he's got nothing. And then this is the power of the Zergamajurger, especially with a macro hatchery. He just suddenly decides that every single penny he spends is going to go towards army, and he can like almost instantly catch up to you. Also notice you really didn't build a single unit during your push. You kept up on SCVs and supply depots and second command center, which is awesome. That's great. But you didn't build any units, and that's kind of ridiculous. And I don't want you looking back at your base to build units either. So it's good to be ahead on supply depots so that you can just use your hotkeys and just be like, you know, tank, marine, Thor, tank, marine, whatever. So yeah, it's cool. It's hard to get that armory up during your push, but while your push is walking across the field is a good time to throw down that armory. I don't know that I have a lot more to say. Let's see. So really, at this point, you're ahead on spending, you're ahead on resources, and you're ahead on income. You're ahead in every way. It's really just the mutas that caught you off guard and really ended the game. You should always expect mutas when you go to factory opening, because it's the one thing that can really kill tanks. Like, tanks are so strong against everything that is not mutas. As long as you never try to move across the field with them, if you just camp them on defense, there's nothing you can do at the front of your base that's scary at all. So now all you got to do is worry about the back of your base, worry about the mutas. Yep. Alright. I suppose, I don't know if I talked about whether or not your push actually was the right build order to do the push in general. Because at 8 minutes, you really want a $2,000 army, and you had 1,800, so you're only $200 short. I don't know that it's even really worth mentioning, because you have all that money tied up in queuing these dudes, and yeah, so I guess you did okay in the opening push. I really like to, when I do the 2-tank push, I just want to look at what order you built your buildings in. So racks, gas, second supply depot, and then orbital. And now is when I like to get my second gas super early. It's going to delay your first factory a tiny bit, but it's going to make your second factory pop out so much sooner, and that's going to increase your awesomeness count. So this second gas is a little bit late. When you're doing something like double factory siege tank heavy, I think probably the reason you didn't have enough gas for siege mode was just that you took the second gas so late. Oh, it's not like it was super late, but it was late enough that you didn't have enough gas. Also, Hellions, you gotta remember, Hellions are only minerals and they're only 100. But it's every 30 seconds, and a tank is 45 seconds, so that's 1.5 times as long, and it takes 150 minerals and 125 gas. So building one Hellion at a time is gonna spend the same amount of minerals as building a Hellion in a tank. I mean, as building tanks. So the mineral cost of building stuff at a factory with a tech lab is the same whether you're making Hellions or tanks. The only difference is the gas cost. So if you find yourself in need of the gas to get siege mode, make a Hellion and then get siege mode, you know? I know I've said Hellions are a very specific unit and have lots of considerations and whatever, but with this first push, he's almost always going to defend it with Lings and drones, and Hellions are great against Lings and drones. So yeah. Plus, the speed of Hellions means that if you build a Hellion right now, it's going to be with your push before your push gets there. So you never want to be reinforcing a long cross-field push with slow units like tanks and Thors. Hellions and Marines are a great way to reinforce. The cheaper the unit and the faster the unit walks, the better they are for reinforcement. And Hellions are both extremely cheap and extremely fast, so they're like the best reinforcing unit ever. Also, I would bring 3 SCVs with you, because 3 SCVs is not going to reduce your income very much. If you pulled 5 or 7, then that's more of an all-in. But 3 SCVs can auto-repair these tanks, and more importantly, they can get bunkers up. You can gain a small advantage with the first push against Zerg, but if you don't get a bunker up, he will eventually overwhelm you no matter what you do. There is no way to produce enough army so that you can stand toe-to-toe with a Zerg. It's just impossible. The only way to killing blow a Zerg is for either for him to give up, or for him not to have a second macro hatch in his base, while also missing creep larva injects, where he, like larva blocks himself. Or to get bunkers. So bunkers are awesome. TvZ, totally bunker it up, baby. Good positions for bunkers are anywhere at the top of this ramp. Yeah. And be careful of the mutas, baby. Careful, careful, careful. Yep. So when you push, bring 3 SCVs on auto repair and make some bunkers. And throw down your armory and engineering bay right when your push is starting to fight, and then just transition into pure Thor for a while and Marines. Yep. Moho. Yep. Moho.